Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. A special good evening to our very special guest. Good evening to whoever you are, wherever you are around the world, and welcome very much to this very special live stream. This is something that we're running on a regular basis in partnership with ACCA, and it's called The Journey to CEO. If this is the first time you've joined one of the live streams, then absolute huge welcome to you. And if you've joined before, then of course, thank you very much for returning back to the live stream. This is our focused session, drilling into and understanding the insights and journey that CEOs have gone through to get to where they are. We've had an opportunity now to work with more than 1,000 CEOs in more than 50 countries around the world. And one of the things we find in common is hardly any of those CEOs began with the journey in mind to become the CEO. So I think this is an expose, a sharing session to share with you what we found and also what CEOs have found in terms of their career and their journey to date. We're absolutely delighted to have a very, very special guest here live all the way from the Philippines. So in a moment, I'm going to introduce our very special guest for this live stream. I am conscious that we've got people dialing in and connecting in from all around the world. We've got someone here. We've got Jim Hodge dialing in from New Hampshire here in the USA. We've got Faye here from Manchester in the UK. We've got Karen here from South Africa. We've got Maria from the Philippines. A few people actually here from the Philippines. So shout out to Penn. Yeah, awesome. So give your city, give your town, give your country a shout out. And we're excited to get into this. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our very special guest for this month's live stream, Mr. Lorenzo Chan. Lorenzo is the CEO of Pioneer Insurance, the leading insurance company in the Philippines. And Lorenzo and I met a few months ago, ironically, in Egypt, where I was interviewing him about his exceptional book called Covering Nane. So I'd like to introduce, with no further ado, Mr. Lorenzo Chan. How are you doing, sir?
Very well, thank you. And hi to everyone. I'm not going to repeat all the greetings except hello and from the Philippines, mabuhay.
Ah, excellent. So obviously this is late in the evening for you. This is what, around 10 o'clock for you?
No, 9 p.m.
Oh, easy, early. Wonderful. Well, again, a huge thank you for being here. And we're conscious because we're getting news reports over the last 24 hours in the UK of some of the typhoon damage. So thankfully, Philippines has not fared too badly. But Hong Kong got it worse, right? Yeah. Well, a huge thank you for being here. This is all about your life, your career, your journey. As I said at the beginning with the intro, most of the CEOs that we meet around the world are, in a way, sort of accidental CEOs. I mean, in a good way, because their career sort of journey evolved and so on. So this is a great opportunity to learn from you and understand about your career journey as well. So maybe we could just start. Where are you at? How are things with you?
I'm all right. I think I'm currently, as you did in the introduction, I'm currently the group head of the Pioneer Group. Now, unlike many other group of companies, they're in varied industries. We're not. We're a collection of insurance companies. There's about 5-6 insurance companies within the group. I mean, each with a special focus, albeit, and primarily working within the 7,000 islands of the Philippines. So I oversee the group, and then currently there's a direction from the board to do some diversification. So we're doing a bit of that. And on this, as an adjunct to the work I do, I also chair the Microinsurance Network, which is really an NGO based out of Luxembourg, which is a membership organization of people who want to further the cause of financial inclusion.
So, and for those who may not know, and they may have heard of microfinance and microbanking, what is microinsurance? If you could just explain to us.
Simply put, microinsurance is insurance that is tailor-fitted, designed for the low-income sector.
Right. Okay. Which, of course, benefits a huge population around the world who need some sort of cover and backup, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Perfect. So in terms of your career journey, again, we talk about this, most CEOs are the accidental CEO. So if we rewind back a few years to the beginning of your career journey, was this the intention? Make it to group head, group CEO one day, or how did your career unfold? If you could talk us through your journey.
No, okay. It's a very long journey because I'm not very young anymore. So I don't know, Wayne, if I should focus primarily on being group CEO rather than all the other bits, because that could be quite that could be a long journey in itself. But so, if I may, off the cuff, my start in insurance started decades ago, and I really just did grunt work. I started off doing basic front work, probably a job slightly above, a cut above slavery, as some people will call it. And so it's led to a lot of other points in time. But maybe I can tell you a bit about my being group CEO, because it really just started several years ago, shortly before the pandemic. I was at that time already running the life company of the group, and I was allowed to embark on greenfield operations, and I had started something on financial inclusion, on really designing a product that tackled and helped the low income sector. And this is really driven by the desire to grow the business. Like any other business, you need to grow the business, you need to increase your market share, et cetera, et cetera. And for me, with insurance, where else do you go? Everyone is fighting over the bloody A, B corporate sector, the ones who can afford. Everyone's doing that. And so if you really want to grow the market, if you really want to become an insurer of choice, I was convincing the board, you've got to go down the pyramid where there are millions of people, underserved and unserved. And so I was doing a lot of that, in the early years with a lot of failures, but then later on that sort of evolved into the promising success and the success it has become today. And so I was doing all of that, and near the start of the pandemic, my predecessor had to chat with me to say that, you really should take over from me and become the group CEO. And for me, I was saying, no. I mean, you've been at this all this time. I'm not sure if you're ready, to let go, because he's a very committed, driven individual to the work. And so I said, no. I'm not interested. I'm happy with what I'm doing. And so I'm creating some impact, and I'm fine. And he was very persistent, and we kept at it for the span of the first year of the pandemic. And until one time, I just realized that I was in fact already, during the first year of the pandemic, handling a lot of the items for the group, the direction and how we were coping, and all the work from home and digitalization that had enabled that happened before that. So I said, well, maybe I reached a realization, maybe I am ready for the role, and maybe Pioneer was ripe for the next chapter. It had become a very significant player, but then I had thought that maybe the next step, Pioneer actually turned 70 last year. I just want to make sure to tell you that I wasn't around at the time it was founded.
I was going to say, you look great.
So the whole issue about pursuing profit and purpose, about making the numbers while making a difference. And I really felt Pioneer was ripe for it, because it had grown to be a substantive, influential player in the market. And so when you're of a certain heft and size, then you are able to make such a call to go to the next step, the next decision. And so that was that. And I thought, yeah, so why not? And so after probably a year of just toing and froing, I said, okay, let me take it on. So that was right in the height of the pandemic.
Yeah, right. Wow, what decision. And what did you see when you sort of came?
Sorry, wait, you mentioned about people, really that plan to be CEOs. I met someone the other day who remembers me as the reluctant CEO.
Ah, interesting. Okay. Kicking and screaming to take the position.
Well, maybe not kicking.
And what did you see first? I think, that what was that moment where you take the role, and then I'm sure, like many things in life, things in reality don't often appear as they seem. So, you would have had a perception about what the role was like. Was the perception about what it would be like exactly what it was like, or what was different?
I don't think I had unrealistic expectations. Because I'd worked long enough with teams of people and with the group, so I knew what they were like. I knew what they'd undergone. I knew the strengths within the organization. I knew the areas that I would have wanted to tweak and improve. And so, I thought I had realistic expectations going into it. I was proud of the strengths, but the one thing that sort of baffled me was how attached people can get to certain ways of doing things and certain beliefs and mindsets. And these are motivated not by ill will, but rather by the belief that I'm doing my job. This is how it should be done. And of course, over the course of time, when you grow, I think you evolve with the market, and you also sometimes adopt certain practices in the market that may not be as desirable as they should be. And these things which earlier help you gain a foothold in the market can sometimes come back to bite you. And so these were the things that I said, okay, I mean, that's built on the strengths, as one should. It doesn't make sense to reinvent the wheel, but let's just tweak whatever needs to be done. Yeah. And so, of course, the most obvious things you start with would be KYC, anti-money laundering bits. These are also the basic stuff, isn't it? And of course, the government was hard, pushing hard, hard at work and pushing all of this. But I also realized that a lot of the industry was not really doing it, or not to the same extent. And getting people to do it was really a challenge. Yeah. Because they were resisting. They were resistant. If you keep insisting on this, we're not going to get the business. This big producer is going to pull out. He's going to go elsewhere because they claim the other people are not doing it. That's a lie, of course.
Yeah.
That's a lie. So it came to such a point. I actually had some encounters with middle-level managers who said, "No, sir, I think this is going to be really bad for the top line." And I said, "Okay, so how much are we talking about?" So he'd say something like, "Okay, that it's going to cost us 50 million." Okay, so it's about $1 million. That's about $1 million. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Are you in fact telling me that there is a value to what we're trying to pursue, which is really compliance? It had to do with integrity, which has to do with a lot of the other items we wanted to pursue. Now, without a lot of this data, we couldn't." And we had this pushback until towards the end. I said, "No, I mean, this is the way we're going to go." And he was hell bent. He was of the belief we would lose the account completely.
Right.
And so we did. We did pursue. And yet we kept 80% of the account.
Oh, amazing.
So, I mean, so for me, standing one's ground sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we saw this report, and it was actually met the guy. He's a cardiologist, and he was looking at what percentage of men following a heart. He asked me the question, what percentage of men, actually, we'll ask you in the chat, see if you can answer this. What percentage of men following a heart attack will change their behavior following a heart attack? So what do you think? For those of you who've got access to a chat function, what percentage of men following a heart attack will change their behavior, i.e. they will eat a bit better or they will exercise a little more? What percentage of men do you think will change the way that they behave? I don't know if anyone in the chat can answer this. 92, Jim says. Jim is very optimistic. This is an optimistic human being. Joe is not so optimistic, 0%, she says, or he says. Actually, it was 21%. So Sherry Ann is probably the closest so far. 21% of men following a heart. Maybe it would be different for women. I don't know. But the point that he was making was that often we think that changing your ways, changing your behavior, doing things differently is quite easy. It's so fundamentally difficult. And even following something as significant as a warning that says, if you do not change your ways, you're not going to last much longer. Even in that situation, only 1 in 5 can change. And he was saying to me, actually, all 5 want to change, but only 1 will be able to, because it's that difficult to change your behavior. And the reason why he sort of stopped me dead in my tracks, Lorenzo, because I was talking to him about behavioral change and culture change in organizations. And he was like, hold on, I need you to understand how difficult this is. But 21%. So I think, what you've achieved with keeping 80% of the business, as you wanted it to be there and making the change is a phenomenal result. Absolutely brilliant. And then I was interested because I wanted to get in your book a little bit, talk about that a bit. And I kind of wanted to combine that with your views on customer insight and customer interaction. And this was one of the big things for me that was so impressive in understanding the journey that you went through after Typhoon Haiyan, and then how you interacted with customers. So I don't know whether you could combine the sort of the evolution of the book with what you went through in the business from 2012.
Right. And so do you want me to tackle the customer insights bit as well, or sort of do it together?
Yeah, let's try and do it together, because I think it was a really nice story.
Okay. I'm going to start off by saying this. Those of us in the insurance industry, we are not loved. We are not trusted. We are not deemed sexy. And folks, there's one thing even worse than that. And that is most of us have no self-awareness. That is how we are regarded negatively.
Right.
Quick to push products, collect premiums, product peddlers, slow to pay claims, full of legal gibberish and gobbledygook. And so that is that. And so very early at the onset, when I was, convincing the board, okay, let's go down the pyramid. Let us seek to serve this huge market that's underserved. Okay, how do we do it? If we were to do it directly, there was no chance of great success, given the negative stereotype of insurers across the globe. And so quickly in those days, one of the good things that came to my head was that, okay, so they don't trust us, and we're not deemed to be sexy. We're not going to attract them. So how can we do that? So we realized partnerships. Who do this target market, who do these segments trust? Which entities do they patronize? Which institutions carry great credibility with them? And so where do you start? I mean, logic, common sense. The low-income sector cannot afford a loan from a bank because they have no collaterals. So what happens is they'll go to a microfinance institute. They'll go to a local cooperative. They'll go to an NGO. And these are entities then that are potential partnerships because they're trusted. The low-income sector will not be able to buy a car, but they'll be able to save up for a motorbike. So a motorcycle dealer. Almost every low-income family in the Philippines will have one or even two relatives working overseas as a migrant worker to send money home. Money remittance agencies. So already off the top of my head, there were all these three potential groups, and there are more actually as partnerships. Now, the point is to convince these people to partner with us, to make sure that there's an alignment of values. I know it sounds corny, but that is highly necessary. When it comes down to it, at the end of the day, values matter. And so it's to convince them to go into a partnership so that we can hopefully piggyback off that credibility at the onset to gain their trust to actually patronize our product. Okay. But of course, over the course of time, we have to earn the trust. It's not enough that you piggyback off that. You've got to earn the trust. And with insurance, you can only earn the trust by paying claims, because they're buying an intangible product. Hence, at the time of a claim, when you pay it, that is the moment of truth. Okay, so we started off doing that. And so together with a partner, it is to go out to that market, go to the field, to their clients, and talk to them and interview them and find out what is it they need, what are the risks that they face every day, and even in preparation for potential insurance products, how much can they afford to set aside? And it isn't even an issue of is it expensive or is it cheap? It's really an issue of affordability, because it's all relative, isn't it? What's cheap to me may be expensive to you. And so the other issue is that, and for me, the one learning is also how often do they get paid? Some people get paid daily. Some people get paid, weekly. Some people get paid monthly. So even the design of the product payment can follow that, can be adjusted to that. So these are important stuff. So let us start off then with this partnership. Let us then say, how do we do, let's address the negatives. The negatives are enrollments. There's so many forms to fill out. And so Wayne, one of the big issues I had was that life insurance, normally companies, when you apply, you fill up easily 5 to 7 sheets of paper, minimum. And so we were coming up with our first product for the micro sector, and it is anywhere from $1 to $3. And so I was talking, and the team came back to me. They said, "Okay, this is the form." I said, "What the heck is this? This is 3 pages. This is 4 pages." They said, "I told you to reduce it," and they said, "Oh yeah, we did. I mean, it used to be 7." Okay. So we actually went through a painful process. Why do we need this? We literally did that. We locked ourselves in the room and said, "Why do we need this? Who's requiring this? Is it regulation? Is it is it auditor? Who's requesting this? Is it the underwriter?" Today, the bulk of our micro products only require 7 data fields to be filled out.
Right.
And so that's simplified, and so that's hopefully made the experience of enrollment more positive. Of course, then you go into the issue of claims. You talk about Yolanda or Haiyan. Haiyan was one of the worst storms to hit the Philippines. It was in 2013, towards the end of the year. And of course, we were invited, by the government, come down, come one, come all, set up shop in City Hall so you can pay claims to the most badly hit region in the country. We were there for a day or two. Nobody came. Folks, you've lost your home. You have missing relatives.
Yeah.
You're not going to be going to say, oh, let me look for my policy and go and claim at City Hall. So we reversed course and says, we're going to go out to where the people are. So we actually packed up. We went to the heart of town, set up on the sidewalk. And in the book, you have photos of that. We set up on the sidewalk with a small table, a chair, a couple of people, and a tarpaulin saying, Pioneer, Cart Pioneer. And then that's not enough. You sort of go out because it's a small community. You actually know people. We say, so are you a client? Are you a client of our MFI partner? So they'll tell us, yeah, I am. I've been with them for 2 years, blah, blah, blah. So we'll say, so do you live here? Yes. Where do you live? What's happened to your house? And then they'll sort of go like that. Says, I live over there. They'll point to a direction. And if you look at it, it's nothing but flatland. Everything has been blown away by the cyclone.
Yeah.
Now, traditional insurance would say, okay, let's send a surveyor. Let's have an adjuster do the report. Come on, folks. There's no time for that. These people need help immediately. There is no backup plan. There is no plan B for a number of these people from that sector. So we said, okay. We said, let's look for alternative ways of doing things. We talked with the local government people on the ground. We said, can you confirm that this guy is a resident? They'll sign off a paper. We'll talk to our partner who says they're a member. We'll check our records. Yep, premium updated, etc. Come back tomorrow and we'll pay you in cash.
Wow.
So again, the difference of that, it's being able to do that. Or one of the early stories, but my favorite story of what we had to do in the early days of this foray into this low-income insurance was, it's in the south, Cebu Island. A widow walks to the door crying and saying, I need to get paid. My husband's died and blah, 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 blah. And we said, of course. And we checked the records. He is, in fact, on the list. So we said, why don't you give us a death certificate? We'll simplify it. Just a death certificate, nothing else. Oh, I can't give you that. Why not? I cannot pay the bill. The hospital will not release the body. Neither will they release a death certificate until they pay up.
Oh my God.
And so, it's
so traumatic.
And you have the insurance company saying, yeah, I just need a death certificate and I'll pay. And the other one saying that. Now, traditionally, one would say, well, that's your issue. That's not mine. So we just said, no, let's do it another way. Why don't we just send someone to the hospital to ascertain? And we did. And they came back after 40 minutes, an hour, and says, yep, that's our client. Yep, dead. So we said, okay, we're going to advance you the settlement, and you can come back with the documents later on, which he did. Just the ability to simplify. Or one of my other stories that a young woman went overseas to work and was sexually assaulted, and we had covered her with our migrant workers coverage, and she was she felt very, very traumatized, and subsequently she passed away. So it's in the news, in the press. It was really, really, so everyone's saying, oh my God, is the government doing anything, etc. And so the government calls us up to say that we understand that she's covered with you. We said, yeah, she is. And so my colleague who took the call says, yeah, we're going to process it. So he comes to me to say that this, they're saying, the government's saying we have to, they want to be able to say that, she's covered by insurance and all that. But I said, so what's stopping us? And he says, again, we're waiting for some documentation because there's no documentation submitted. So in my mind, I said, hey, let's think around it. Why do we need documentation to prove the claim? The government has said the woman has died. We've read it in the news. We've seen it in the press. What more proof do we need?
Yeah.
Move. Let's settle. Okay. Again, there's really all these ways really of addressing that. And so my insights are that we have to earn trust. And very often it isn't just an issue of asking why, but actually questioning the status quo and asking why not.
Yeah.
Why not? And that's how you challenge, and that's how you change. And so again, for this micro sector, claims must be settled in days, not weeks, not months.
Yeah. I mean, here in the UK at the moment, Lorenzo, there's I heard it yesterday on the news, there's a super complaint, this is called, raised by one of the consumer organizations against a large number of the insurance companies here because of public concern about speed of payment, claims that were obviously where people should be paid and they're not being paid. But exactly as you say, this damages the reputation of the entire sector of insurers, regardless of what type of insurance you're in. So you're absolutely right. And I guess the people that you're dealing with are in such desperate need, in immediate need. They can't wait a week, right? This needs to be immediate.
And Wayne, people don't realize it. And sometimes people tell me, and sometimes the accusation levied against, oh my God, it's such a small amount. It's such a small amount. What can they do with it?
Yeah.
We once paid a widow about $2,300 worth of insurance, of her husband. With that, because he died drowning in the flood caused by typhoon. So we asked her what she did with the money, $2,300 worth. She said, I buried my husband. My father, who suffered a bad accident during the storm and the flooding, needed one of his foot amputated. I paid for the medical bills. I restored the roof over our house. I started a small business. All that for $2,300.
That's amazing.
For you and I, maybe that's a trip, yeah. It's it's a nice plane ride around, somewhere, in a short holiday. But and she told me because of that, I never had to set foot in the evacuation center. And folks, there's one less person lining up for dole outs. That's one person less, lining up for a freebie.
And also that she's been able to invest some of that to start at least a mechanism of being able to earn some money through a small business. I mean, what a wonderful outcome as well. Amazing. So as you went through this, and hopefully, God willing, you never have to go through this again, and the country never has to go through this. What about your insights in terms of, I suspect that's not likely, is it, given global warming? What are your thoughts in terms of your observations around leadership and management? Because you were leading a large group of people with a large group of important stakeholders and customers in a very challenged time. I mean, I'm sure in the midst of it, you just got on with it because you have to. And just sort of reflecting back, what did you learn about your own leadership management style?
Do not pretend you know everything about the client. Do not pretend you have the answer for all their problems. Leave your desk in the office. Leave your desk in the office and get out to the field.
Yeah.
Okay. Today, when we started in the early days, we did a lot of immersion on the ground, interviewing people. One of there'd be days I'd spent riding a jeepney. One of our clients is a jeepney driver, so he would ply his route. I don't know, for those of you who are not aware, a jeepney is like a smaller type of bus, that plies the route. So they take public passengers. So I spend a day with him. I'm seated next to him, and he takes passengers. They get on, they get off. It's a great way of sort of chatting with him and finding out what's happened to him, et cetera, et cetera. So at the end of the day, he says, "You want to come and come to my house, see my house. You can meet my wife." Okay, so he brings me there. So we arrive in this house. So we go through all these banana trees. It's all this area. It's a decent house, not terrific, but finished. And then all of a sudden I see it's like 10, 12 people. I said, what are all these people doing outside your house? Oh, he said, I text ahead, and I think my wife told them I was going to bring someone over, a CEO, and they're just very curious what you look like. So get off, and they said, "Okay, come, everyone, come into the house. Let's do a town hall, okay, an informal town hall." And of course, they laugh. They say, and then I started chatting. So, what do you do? What are your livelihoods? Blah 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 blah. I go through all that, and then I finally say, "How many of you actually have insurance?" Because the jeepney driver has insurance now. That's Eduardo, who I know, and probably about 8 hands went up out of the 12 or so, and I was really flabbergastedly happy. I said, "Oh my God, yes, there is hope for us." And then the next question I had was that how many of you have had a claim paid? About 6 hands went up, which is pretty positive. So I said, So is there anything else? Do you still have any needs that we're not addressing? And then two hands came up and they said, yeah, emergency care. I said, whenever we have an emergency and we have to rush to the emergency room, we are not accepted. We are not admitted because we cannot, if we don't put a deposit, they will not take us in. I said, oh, but that's illegal. They said, sir, you may call it what you like, but if we don't put up a deposit, they don't admit us. What do you do? Oh, we SMS people for loans, for help, etc. And sometimes we go home. I said, okay, so whenever you're in this situation, how much do you spend? So they start saying, some people told me $100, some people say, $300. So we have a range. I said, now, if we were to craft some product like that for you to address this need, how much would you be able to set aside? So they said, oh, maybe $5, $10. So this conversation, we carry on. I take it back to the lab, the office is now our lab, and we experiment and try to put something together to see if it makes sense. And then with each semblance of as it takes shape and form, we go back to them and ask, does this work? Will this work? Etc. We keep going back and forth. How many iterations it takes. And in fact, one of the learnings we had from that whole iteration was that they said, why don't you have maternity? I said, because it's not an emergency thing, it's a maternity. They said, nope. For us, giving birth is an emergency. It has to be covered. Okay, so that's one of the learnings we had, and instead of telling them it's not, we adopted that, provide a small portion. So we tweaked that, over a span of a few months, and then we then had to work to convince participating hospitals and clinics, for this. And in fact, we launched it right before the pandemic and continued to launch it. Today, that's one of the most successful products we have.
Wow, what a story. I mean,
and that came from that experience. You spend time, and that's how it came about. And my other bit, and still today, one of my most humbling, I don't know if I call it humiliating, humbling experience was we said, let's go out and help the mom and pop stores. Everybody talks about MSMEs, and they're the best thing since baked bread, and they're the backbone of every economy in the world, of every economy, et cetera. And there's over 1 million mom and pop stores in the Philippines. So we said, let's go and then talk to them and do some research. So we go and we introduce ourselves as, we're doing some research. We're going to find out about this. And this, this woman in a house dress, really quite intelligent, chats us up, etc., answers a lot of questions. But the moment I say, this has been so helpful, we're from insurance, and this will help us design a product to better serve you guys. The moment I said that, she said, insurance?
Oh,
I don't need insurance. And then they start talking about the negative experiences they've had with some insurance companies and all that. And so again, without going into the field, without being in touch with the ground, you will never know that.
Yeah.
Everything remains a mere anecdote.
I think for anybody listening in who's on their career journey, so again, we don't know who you are, where you're from. We've got a few names here, but it might be that you're already in a senior position, or it might be that you're at the beginning stages of your career. And I think what Lorenzo is just sharing is probably one of the best examples I could ever wish to share with you in terms of the type of behavior you need in order to be successful as an entrepreneur, because what you're doing is it's highly inquisitive. You're testing out reality, and a lot of people like to believe what they think is reality without really testing it. And it's the same type of behavior we see from tons of really successful CEOs. It's absolutely that. You've got to test exactly what you say and understand that you have no idea about what the client wants until you spend the time, as you've done, turning a one-to-one meeting into a local town hall into a product. It's remarkable.
But there's one thing I really must address, because there's this issue about millennials, isn't it? And like many people, I was very skeptical about that creature called the millennial that was coming of age, several years ago. But we actually had anthropological research done on that creature, and had great findings, out of which we built upon, some of our policies in hiring and motivating staff.
Yeah.
So today, our microinsurance team is composed of millennials. There's about 300 worth of millennials. And one of the things we encourage them to go through if they're new with us is to do an immersion, by not just do field work, but by going to live with our clients. So we actually make arrangements for them to go and live with our clients, the butcher, the baker, the farmer, the fisher folk. And so they actually spent 3 to 4 days with them. And again, you will never know what it's like until you step into their shoes, or sleep in their houses, or eat with them in their dining areas. And so they come back with a wealth of appreciation of what it means. You must pay them quicker, you must process it faster, and this is what they need, etc. And it's a better appreciation of what they need and how we can serve them better. And what's most important is that we were silly enough we always give the staff some money. Can you give this to the mother of the house to help pay the bills? And then to this day, no family has ever accepted our money. They always say that it's a deep honor. Some corporation out there wants to know more about our lives and learn about us, interview us, spend time with us. This is something that honors us. We cannot take your money. Now we've learned. Now they bring rice, they bring canned food, they bring instant noodles, and they accept. But our takeaway is that generosity does not come from how much you have. It comes from how much you're willing to share. And that applies to everyone.
This is like the perfect ending, but I don't want to end here because I've got another question for you. This is just, honestly, this is so fun. What exactly as Sherry Ann has just said, this is emotional intelligence. I was just going to say, this is like a masterclass story here, Lorenzo, of empathy, because what you're doing is you're baking empathy into the organization of how it operates, like getting the new recruits to go and spend time with the families. I mean, one of the things that I lecture at one of the business schools here in London, and if you can see, you can't see out the window, but we have some rare sunshine. And one of the things that we share with the undergraduates is when you go into the world of work, what is it that you want? And we ask some questions here. And a fascinating piece of insight for us has been nearly all of the undergraduates that I speak to at the university perceive that the organizations they're going to go into are not entrepreneurial. And actually what they want to do is they want to get in there for a couple of years, get the good brand name on their CV, resume, and then go somewhere else. And I had a conversation with one of the banks we work with, and I said to them, look, you're taking on tons of new graduates every year. As far as they're concerned, you're a stale company. They join you because you've got a good brand. This bank was saying to me, actually, no, you've got it wrong, Wayne. Everyone wants to work for us. I said, well, no, that's what they say to you. They're not going to come and lie to you and say, actually, I really want to work here, but in 2 years, I'm planning to leave. They're not going to be honest, sorry. They're going to lie and say they want to work here forever. And all you need to do to change that is you need to provide some what we would call like an entrepreneurial opportunity for them to be able to spend more time with the customer, with the client, because it gives them the feeling that also that they are being able to think about what it needs to grow their own company, grow their own specialism. But the organization is so paternalistic that it says, don't worry about that. We'll take care of all of that. And you do exactly what we tell you to do. So they don't need to change anything. All they need to change is the way that they approach the talent and benefit from the inquisitive nature of the millennials or Gen Alpha, whatever the generation's called. But people are inquisitive. They want to learn. They want to grow their own businesses. They want to be entrepreneurial. And I think what better place than to build that skill set in a big organization where you've got the safety of a paycheck every month than actually going out alone and starting your own company. And it's the smartest way to do it. But yeah, I think that what you're providing for people is obviously great for your company, great for your customers, but also for the individuals involved. And I mean, this is an amazing skill set to build early on in their career.
Wayne, the one thing we actually realized was that this opportunity to serve the underserved actually worked into one of the highlights of the findings of the research we did, which was that at least certainly Philippine millennials want to do good. Yeah. They want to have a purpose. And it sort of just fitted it in. And we tested that. There'd be days, bad storms, bad typhoons, on a Thursday, Friday. So we'd say, okay, we've got to go out, let's take out the van, let's go out to let's go out to this field, et cetera, where there were massive floods. And they'd go on a weekend. Yeah. And they're willing to do it.
Remarkable.
And for me, it's a great realization that yes, we can all have purpose.
Yeah.
Of course, we get a paycheck, but we can all have purpose. And that's very meaningful. Now, the other bit that you mentioned about was for me, I wanted to add was that creating a safe space. I think if people come back now from the field and all sorts of insights, and they want to share, they want to tell you. And very often you have your old guards, standing guards saying, no, that's yeah, we understand that, but we're gonna do this because it's the safe way, this is the way it's done, et cetera. And sometimes young people or even new people just aren't aware of how far they can go. And so it's really the ability to create a safe space to say, okay, we can all speak up. We can all speak responsibly. We can all criticize constructively. but speaking up and calling people out is not necessarily bad. It isn't throwing people under the bus, as people like to say. Now, if I speak something, say something negative about Wayne, that's throwing him under the bus. No, in fact, very often we realize that if you don't call it out, that person might already be derailing the bus, and you're so worried about all that. And so, for me, that's very, and you really cannot encourage innovation if you don't allow people that safe space to talk.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, there's a huge movement also now here, well, everywhere with talking about psychological safety and how you create that type of culture is key. I'm going to ask you, I've got one final question I'd love to ask. And also for anyone connected in, whether you're connected in through LinkedIn Live, through Facebook or YouTube, or however you've managed to get here, if you've got access to a chat function, please feel free to drop a question in. We're going to have time for a few questions for Lorenzo before we close. So maybe if you could give some thought to a question and pop that through in the chat. I've also got one of my colleagues here, also from the UK, Rose, so she can pick up on the questions coming in. So final question for me, Lorenzo, is in terms of like the future, where you go next. I mean, having had the experience you've had of leading the group, all of the sort of intimate, intricate experiences with customers and finding out what you found out about not just the company, but the customers, the industry, what's going on in the sort of bigger macroeconomic situation around the world as well, which affects your business, and also the network that you chair in microinsurance. For you, in terms of the next 3 to 5 years, strategy, growth, where do you, in a world of infinite opportunity and possibility, and a man who's so attuned to it, where do you place your chips on the table? Where do you place your bets?
I think at this stage, it is imparting a lot of the lessons that on the one hand, it's imparting a lot of the lessons I've learned in the workplace. Number one, very few individuals are blessed enough to do what they love.
True.
So the rest of us will just have to learn to love what we do. Okay, that's number one. And that can be done. And we've done that. I mean, my passion is the arts.
Right.
And yet, insurance. I've managed to contribute and make it work. Number two, the ability to weave one's passion into one's work is often quite important. We often think, that's not possible. That's not possible. It is. We've always worried about, in the insurance industry, succession and how do you attract new people and young people, etc. And so I've always felt the need to be relevant to the youth, to the next generation, whether it's a millennial, a Gen Y, or a Gen Z, and soon a Gen A. How do you do that? And for me, it's how do you stay competitive? How do you do that? And so how do you establish relevance? And so we actually, out of the research again, Wayne, we actually institute competitions for college and university students nationwide fairly regularly. It used to be annually before the pandemic, and we've just resumed it this year. So these are woven around artistic endeavors, short film competition, playwriting, song composition, graphic t-shirt design, open to all students. And we actually partner with institutions that, for songwriting, we partner with the Composers Association. We do campus tours. We bring, we bring big composers and singing stars, to talk about their work and their job, during the campus, and we launch the event, etc. And so out of this, it establishes more relevance. It's a passion of mine, of art, and yet we're using art to connect, to make ourselves more relevant. And and sometimes you, on the off chance, unexpectedly, you end up with people who actually apply, say, I joined the contest 3 years ago. I was a finalist. I didn't make it. I'm now graduated. I'm willing to look for a job. And so all of that is actually worked out unexpectedly. Now, I believe this whole purpose of profit and purpose, delivering your numbers, but also making a difference. You make the numbers, but you make a difference. You look at a view of the top, but you're always conscious of what really is the critical bottom line. This is very important, and it's a lesson that we share as Pioneer and as the microinsurance network. And so I think that's why you met me. I think there's a lot of interest in knowing more about this. Is there a business case? Can it actually be done? Can someone actually talk about it and prove that it can work? And so we do. In that sense, I do a lot of spreading the gospel. I wrote about it, etc. And then today, I mean, of course, there are invitations that can you participate? Can you actually come on board and help us, direct this, etc. So a lot of that. But then I've always said that my dream is that, I want to make sure we cover at least 50% of the Philippine market. So we're currently at about 30 million enrollments now. So you're talking about 57 enrolled, and that would be a good milestone.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
But we continue to spread the gospel, because if our lesson, our pain points, our journey can help guide people to avoid the mistakes we made. They don't have to reinvent the wheel and start from scratch. And they can do this in their part of the world. Hey, I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, remarkable.
Part of that passion is going to be that. Even as I make sure, Pioneer remains future-proofed, in preserving what it does best. And we do a lot of traditional business, but we also grow a lot of micro business.
Yeah. So, awesome. So I'm just conscious we've got a question that also come in here from Laura Miller. It's a big question, this one. How is the geopolitical environment and the emergence of AI challenging leaders today? I'm fascinated how this is challenging perhaps you personally. Are you feeling any effect from this?
I think nowhere. We're actually in the midst of preparing for planning season for 2026 in the next couple of weeks. And I normally write a very heartfelt message that I share with the group, setting, direction, etc. I have never felt the uncertainty existing in the world than I have today.
Yeah.
And this comes across on all fronts. In the olden days, we talk about the geopolitical situation in the local scenario in the Philippines, and then we always but there's always Big Brother, who will direct and dictate, etc. But all the big brothers in the world today, and I shan't mention who they are, each have their own geopolitical challenges that they're going through. So it's all, in many instances, although we remain connected, it's almost every man for himself, isn't it? I think, are there still any more permanent allies? No, for us, it's still with the view. Keep your eye focused. What is it we're after? We are still after offering risk management, protection tools to both the A, B, C, and D sector. That remains front and center. We remain focused on that. There may be, and in fact, the call for the need for insurance is even more apparent today with climate change, natural calamities, food insecurity, all of that. It's rendered the need for a product like insurance. I'm not saying it's a solution to everything, but it is a substantive solution to a lot of the problems. It's not the only solution.
I guess in a world of such uncertainty, insurance becomes more important.
Yes, and so we need our eye on that. We need to remain focused. And it will be needed, even if politics play and people start mucking about with it, the storms will hit, the floods will hit, people need to get paid. People need to rebuild, people need to reconstruct, people need to recover. The need is the same wherever you are.
Yeah, totally. And here's a question from Jinheng Tia. Mr. Lorenzo, appreciate if you can share one quote or thing that motivates you the most. Thank you. This might be from the arts.
This is not a great quote, and I think my favorite quote is that which I gave, which is generosity does not come from how much you have, but from how much you're willing to share. But the other quote, and it's not the best one, but I use very frequently, is with managing people and leading people. I always say that I need to allow accountability and create ownership of people on the team for whatever it is we do. They need to own it so that they are accountable for it. And because of that, I always say that I provide a lot of rope. And you can use the rope to pull yourselves up to the top, or you can use the rope to hang yourself.
Hopefully not the last. We're not condoning hanging in any way, shape, or form.
I will give you the rope, but I will give you the opportunity to make the call. Which way is it going to be?
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And I think when we met for the first time, and when we spoke on stage at the conference, or I interviewed you on the conference, I think, at the end I said to you about your generosity of giving, of sharing. I mean, it's exactly the same as today. I mean, it really shines through. To be able to get this intricate knowledge of some of your experiences and insights is so, again, we're hugely thankful. And I think we've got time for maybe one last question. So if there's a final question, and Zaid said, nice one for the rope. It's a great rope story. So I think we've got, I'm not sure, I think maybe that's it in terms of the questions. If any more do come up, then please share them. And if we can't answer them, then we can answer them following online. We've got access to the online. Again, Lorenzo, just thank you so much for your generosity, the insights and the journey. Although we've met before and we spent some time over dinner as well, but I think I've got another level of appreciation for your journey. And I have one final question, if I could ask a selfish one, which is when at the back in our conversation today, you talked about your sort of realization of looking at some of these different partners where they presented opportunity. It could be the remittances, of the volume of the size of the diaspora, Filipino diaspora around the world is probably more than the Filipinos in the Philippines, I would imagine, or equivalent. There's going to be a lot of people, but this is the same as true for most populations of people. That diaspora had existed for a long time. People had been remitting money back to Philippines for a long time, but what happened in a way, like why did you choose to go after it at that point? Was it because it's something that you realized was an opportunity? Because the opportunity had always existed, but it wasn't until that point that you went after it. You see, it secured your business, a wealth of opportunity as well.
Well, mainly because we've always existed under the same misguided notion as many insurance companies. The low-income sector cannot understand insurance, they cannot afford insurance, they cannot access it, and they'll never be able to grasp it, and they really, and because of that, it isn't worth it. It isn't worth it. And that is not true, because they're the ones who truly need it the most, could benefit from it. And it is up to us, if we're really good at what we do, we have to determine if there's a business case, and there is a business case. I think we saw a lot in the early 2000s, Wayne. It was the advent of microfinance in the world. Muhammad Yunus, in Bangladesh, it spurred this whole movement in the microfinance sector. And we saw a lot of the poor people who had no access to bank loans access it through the microfinance. And of course, they repay. And of course, what did we learn? People, they can't afford to pay. That is not true. A lot of the microfinance partners we have, the repayment ratio is as high as 98, 99%, because these people have no other recourse. If they don't pay, make good this loan, nobody else would lend it to them without a collateral. But we realized that, so they have a nice business, earn something well, or they'll put up a little extension to the house. And then a storm blows off the roof. The head, the head of the family has a bad accident. Somebody falls very ill. Whatever savings they have are depleted, and they start all over again.
Yeah.
And so we said, there is room for insurance to cushion the blow, to help absorb the shock, so that they can recover, rebuild easier. And you're putting this decision in their hands if you make it accessible, so that if they make the choice, they will realize that it's good for them, and that is a form of empowerment. And if they're empowered enough to do that choice, it helps build their resilience. So,
brilliant. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. So that brings us to the end of this session. Again, a huge thank you from us and for, I guess, everybody who's dialed in, whichever platform you've arrived here from. Thank you so much for your time. We're excited to bring more live streams over the next few months, so we'll share more info on that. But again, Lorenzo, a huge thank you to you. Wonderful, and I look forward to speaking with you again, soon, I hope. Thank you very, very much. I'm wishing you a good evening.